Michio was a degenerate loser who lived a pointless life until he woke up in a video game one day. To survive, he decided to become an adventurer and fight dungeons monsters by day, only so he could buy freaky servant baddies to crack at night. Everything starts as Michio wakes up and is shocked to find himself in a barn he's never been in before. The last thing he recalls is playing a virtual reality video game, which makes him assume he's still playing the game, so he picks up his legendary weapon equipped with health and mana absorption, and then sets out to begin missions. Outside, he notices a pack of bandits attack villagers, so he charges in by surprise and helps to defeat them. After the fight, the village chief, named Somura, treats Michio to the spoils of the fight as thanks for saving his people. However, when Michio is about to loot, he realizes that one of the items must have been swapped by someone, so Somura promises to investigate. He then offers Michio a place to stay, so when Michio gets there, he begins thinking about how to log out of the game. But every command sequence he tries doesn't work, and the system informs him that he can't return to reality. With this gaming world being his new reality, Michio gets consumed by grief, because it means he unalived those bandits earlier. The realization makes him spiral, thinking he's no better than the bandits he defeated, but it hits him that it's normal for bandits to attack people in this world. He becomes grateful he's had his first experience with bandits, because now he won't flinch when it's time to face the evil in this new world. That evening, Somura summons Michio and presents a villager in chains, revealing that he was the one who swapped out one of the items. For the theft, Somura reveals that he will be sold off as a slave, and half of the profits will be shared with Michio. Somura then hands Michio the dead bandits' intelligence cards, explaining that he gets to keep the profits if any of them have a bounty on their heads. He adds that Michio will have to go to Vale City to redeem the bounties, which is a big town not far from the village. The following day, Michio sets out on a journey to the big city and carried away when he learns about brothels because it means he can crack baddies for $5 a night. He then stops by the night station to redeem his bounties, and when he's done, he heads to see a slave trader named Alan to trade off the thief. When Michio is done, Alan tries to sweet-talk him into buying slaves because it's what most adventurers do. Since it's his first time, Michio frowns at the idea of slaves, but when Alan says that female servants can be bought and their masters can do anything to them, Michio adds slave buying to his bucket list. All of a sudden, a slave girl named Roxanne arrives to serve him tea, but Michio is carried away by what's on her chest because they jiggle even at rest. Alan notices Michio likes Roxanne and recommends buying her because she's a hot beast warrior who can be of use in the labyrinth and the bedroom. He also adds that no matter how much she gets cracked, she can never reproduce because she isn't human, and to top it all, her V-card is still intact. After hearing this, Michio gives in to the temptation of buying Roxanne to develop the plot, but when Alan tells him the cost, he realizes he can't afford her. On the way out, Michio sees Roxanne again and feels bad that he can't buy her, so Alan gives him 5 days to come up with the money. The following morning, Michio runs an assessment of the money he currently has to figure out how much more he needs to purchase Roxanne. The previous day, he had a conversation with Alan about how to make money fast, and Alan told him to explore the labyrinth, defeat monsters, and sell their remains for profit. However, he also reveals that fighting monsters can't make him money quickly in a short period, and the only thing guaranteed to do so is collecting bounties. On the contrary, Alan advises Michio to avoid collecting bounties because if he does, he would attract too much attention and might end up as a walking target instead. Presently, Michio reflects on this and decides to try out the labyrinth to see how much he can raise in 5 days. Before leaving, he carries his legendary weapon and hides it because he fears people might come after it and he can't bear to lose something so cracked. After that, he heads out into the market to get a regular weapon and uses his status skill to pick the best one suitable for him. When he's done, he wanders off into the woods to find the entrance to the labyrinth. On the way, he notices a group of adventurers heading out of a portal and walks behind them to find the entrance to the labyrinth. Before entering, he equips his legendary weapon and then proceeds inside to begin his quest. While in the labyrinth, Michio notices that he's unlocked the explorer skill and now has an item box to store items, along with the ability to teleport within the labyrinth. He tests out the dungeon teleportation skill and finds it convenient, but he notices he cannot use the same portal to leave the labyrinth. Even when he tries to use a portal to return to the start, it fails, and he realizes that destinations are restricted within the labyrinth. All of a sudden, a needlewood monster approaches him to fight, so he assumes an offensive stance to throw hands with it. In one swing, Michio easily defeats the monster, and he notes that it's thanks to his legendary weapon. After that, he picks up the monster's remains, But that's when another needlewood monster shows up to fight. Seeing it, Michio decides to test out a skill called Overwhelming, which specializes in slowing his opponent's movements. With the skill in effect, the needlewood monster finds it hard to attack Michio, but for some reason, Michio starts feeling lazy about fighting and questions his reason for being in the labyrinth in the first place. After he defeats the monster, he wonders why he almost lost the will to fight, but he realizes he felt the same way after using his dungeon teleport skill and concludes that casting spells drains his mana and makes him pessimistic. He also notes that he's back to normal because his weapon has a mana absorption skill, which helps replenish his lost mana. With this new knowledge, he decides not to use too many spells, at least until he's fully recovered. Later that evening, he finishes up in the labyrinth and heads to the guild to trade in all the loot he got. However, he's a bit disappointed when the cashier values them at just a few gold coins because he still has a long way to go to afford Roxanne. At his lodging, he does the math on how many hours it'll take to make good money from the labyrinth and realizes that the math isn't mathing. Still, he decides that he'll spend more time in the labyrinth. So the following day, Michio wakes up early and uses his teleportation skill to arrive at the labyrinth quickly. However, the spell triggers a drop in his mood that makes him want to go back to his lodging and hug his bed. After it wears off, he runs off to defeat monsters and absorbs their mana to replenish what he's lost. After taking out a few dozen monsters, Michio reaches his breaking point, so he decides to sit down and rest. Looking at his loot, he realizes that 4 days won't be enough for him to make the money he wants, but he's glad that he's gained a few levels from defeating monsters. While he's thinking about what to do next, he mistakenly triggers a block that leads to a secret room. Deep down, Michio thinks the place might be stacked with treasures, so he rushes in to secure the loot. To his shock, the door closes behind him, and before he can react, he gets surrounded by a pack of needlewood monsters with an appetite for human meat. Seeing this, Michio realizes his greed has led him straight into the lion's den, and he's about to become lunch. As a monster claps him from behind, he ducks and counters by using his legendary sword to finish it off in one swing. As for the next one, the monster takes him by surprise and knocks him several feet away. Michio recovers and realizes he's cooked if he takes another hit like that, so he decides to run away using his teleport skill. Unfortunately, when he tries the spell and nothing happens, he realizes he needs to fight the monsters or die. He gets attacked again, but this time, Michio unalives one and uses his weapon's health absorption skill to make up for his lost health points. Now, almost fully recovered, he activates the Overwhelming skill, which slows down the monster's movements. Utilizing the opportunity, Michio takes out about 6 monsters at once before the effects of his skill wear off. As expected, using the spell drains his mana and leaves him vulnerable to a nasty attack from one of the needlewood monsters. Thinking fast, Michio figures he needs to defeat a lot of monsters while using his Overwhelming skill to make up for the mana drain. As he activates the skill again, he quickly unalives about 7 monsters, and when the spell wears off, he doesn't feel the mana drain. Seeing this, the monsters charge at Michio all at once, so Michio uses what's left of his strength to drop them one by one until he's done with them. When he finishes, he escapes the room with all the loot and decides to call it a day and leave at once. On the way to the guild, he notices a gathering of civilians and walks up to them to see what's going on. There, he sees a bandit's corpse and learns that the guy used to hang out in town but was offed by knights. At first, he's scared that the bandits are on a revenge mission to unalive him for what he did to their group a few days ago, but he calms down when he realizes that it was the knights who kicked them out of town in the first place, and they are the ones who might catch that heat. Looking at the corpse again, Michio notices that the bandit's left hand was cut off, so he figures a bounty hunter took it to redeem the bounty. The realization smacks Michio in the face because he didn't think someone could be that desperate, but he realizes that he will need to get his hands dirty if he wants to make good money fast. At his lodging, Michio decides that he will start hunting bandits, but the big question on his mind is how he would pull it off, because unlike last time, he won't be attacking distracted opponents. As he wonders if he's strong enough to do it, he checks his status and realizes he has gained new skills, so he starts doing a loadout that will favor his bounty hunting mission. The following day, Michio heads out in town and tries to use his status skill to identify bandits. At the market, everyone checks out legit, so he decides to check out the slums instead. Michio recalls the warning from the carriage rider about the shady spots nearby, so he makes his way into a dark alley to trigger his teleportation. In an instant, he lands in the slums, and the foul smell hits him immediately, so much that his nose almost retires. Although the area is packed with starving outcasts and people who look completely drained, he doesn't spot a single bandit. As the stench becomes too much and nearly makes him throw up, Michio quickly activates his teleport again and gets out of there without hesitation. Back at his lodging, he cleans himself up and notices that he isn't drained from using the teleportation skill, thanks to the levels he gained in his recent monster encounter. With this, he realizes he might be strong enough to take on the bandits himself. At night, Michio borrows a lantern from his innkeeper and uses it to identify people in the village. Since he finds no bandits, he dilly-dallies into the red light district and finds a whole lot of dudes who might be cheating on their spouses. The sight of girls in all shapes and sizes leaves him diagnosed with erectus syndrome, so he fights the urge to have a good time and stay on mission. Just then, Michio spots an alopecious thug and realizes he's a bandit. As the guy leaves, Michio decides to tail him quietly until he reaches his secret hideout in the slums. There, Michio sees a group of bandits gathered together, and he quickly teleports to stay hidden. He then listens to their conversation and hears one of them mention the name Hugo, which catches Michio's attention because he was one of the bandits he slaughtered at the village a few days ago. He then realizes that this bandit group is either connected to Hugo or might be part of the faction that was forced out of town. The following day, Michio notices a pattern in the red light district as the businesses shut down early, and once they do, bandits are free to move around. They all operate in different groups, each in their own territory, and they make sure not to be in their rival's business. Michio watches the same bandit from last night and figures out his territory, so he assumes that attacking them wouldn't draw others' attention. With this in mind, he returns to his lodging, where the innkeeper offers him a free meal. As they talk, the innkeeper clears up a rumor about the bandits, saying that there was a power struggle among their factions, and the losing side was driven out of town, and the ones turning up dead are those who stayed behind. Hearing this makes it pretty clear to Michio that someone else is after the bandits in town. That night, before Michio sleeps off, the cameraman catches him in 4K fantasizing about getting cultured with Roxanne and visiting her milk factories. The next night, he gets ready with his sword and the thief's bandana, then heads back to the slums with a plan in mind. This time, he approaches a lookout directly and shows him the bandana, then offers a gold coin in exchange for information about Hugo. The man tells him Hugo is already dead, but when Michio pushes for more details, he's told to wait outside. While the man steps in, Michio quietly observes the surroundings and figures out where the others are likely hiding. When the lookout returns, he claims his boss is asleep and suggests Michio come inside and wait. As they move into a room, the man notices Michio's unimpressive weapon and lets his guard down. Once inside, he asks to confirm whether the bandana is genuine, and as Michio reaches to show it, the bandit suddenly makes his move and attacks. After his attempt fails, the bandit admits that Hugo was supposed to take over the succession, but ended up getting chased out by the other factions. He then warns Michio not to run, because he plans to keep the bandana and sell it himself. Michio, however, reveals that this was all part of his setup, and he drops the bandana onto the candle, putting the room in darkness. Using that moment, he drives his sword into the bandit and finishes him, then removes the man's hand to access his intelligence card. Michio moves quietly into the next room, where the rest of the group is, and he sees they are all thieves. He starts by covering one man's head and slicing his neck cleanly, so he doesn't wake up, then cuts off his hand. When he goes for the next one, the beheading makes a sound that alerts a female bandit, but he quickly takes her down from the side. The last bandit grabs a weapon and starts swinging wildly, so Michio teleports out of the room and waits for him to panic and call for help. As soon as the door opens, Michio strikes, kills him, and cuts off his hand, but the noise outside suggests others may have noticed. Not wanting to push his luck, Michio retreats with the 3 hands and teleports to the labyrinth. While there, he briefly reflects on how low he has sunk, though he brushes it off as a side effect of losing mana. Once he leaves, he collects the intelligence cards, yet the images of the people he killed linger in his mind. Even so, he convinces himself that this world works by different rules, and he doesn't really have a choice. Back in his room, Michio worries that claiming multiple bounties too quickly might draw the attention of the knights, but leaving town to claim them could also look suspicious. Frustrated, he pushes the thought aside and distracts himself before falling asleep. The next day, he waits at the night station until he sees the same knight from before, then explains that he was attacked by bandits and managed to defeat them. The knight checks his intelligence card, verifies the claim, and later returns to say only 2 of the bandits had bounties, handing over the reward. Michio counts the money and realizes he finally has enough, so he heads straight to Alan to complete the deal. Alan accepts the payment and brings Roxanne out, and she thanks Michio for coming back while apologizing for doubting him. He tells her it's fine, and she quietly stands by his side. Alan then takes their intelligence cards and finalizes the contract, officially binding them as master and slave, before congratulating Michio on getting the girl he's always wanted. After returning from Alan's office, Michio requests a two-person room from the innkeeper. Being a man of culture, the innkeeper picks a bigger room with a bed for them to share. When they get there, Michio notices Roxanne is nervous, so he calls her closer and asks if he can touch her ears. As soon as she obliges, Michio plays with them and nearly gives in to his fantasy when she asks him if she can call him her master. After calming himself, Michio talks about the bed, asking why it's just one for them to share, but then Roxanne reminds him he was the one who consented to the innkeeper's suggestion. Realizing that was what the innkeeper meant by double, Michio thanks his stars. To make Roxanne relax around him, he informs her that he's from a faraway land and he'll need her help in getting used to the labyrinth. She agrees, and he notices how confident she is in her fighting skills. Roxanne then decides to unpack, and while at it, Michio sees she has no shoes, so he hands her his, and to his surprise, they magically adjust themselves to fit her. As soon as she thanks him and vows to cherish the footwear, Michio, who cannot hold himself back, hugs her from behind and tells her he won't let her escape. At first, Roxanne tenses up, but she lowers her guard before agreeing to his demand. Moments later, they head to the equipment store, where Michio buys her a shield and a pair of battle gloves. Then he helps her pick a cloak before giving her the leeway to purchase some undergarments. Later that evening, when they return to their room, Michio calls Roxanne to sit, but when he sees her move to the floor, he urges her to come to the bed and orders her to sit with him at all times. Roxanne humbly accepts his affection but then tells him how she doesn't mind sleeping on the floor. Realizing some messed up masters behave that way, he vows not to act like that. Excited, he tries to grab her melons, but she leaps off the bed and goes straight to maintain his sword. As she examines it, she tells him it's mandatory to service his weapons, and he notes that she's far suited for battle. Roxanne then tells him she'd like to use her current plot armor as rags to clean their equipment. She stylishly suggests he go to eat while she works on it, but the dunce who can't read between the lines insists they eat together. Left with no choice, she gets up, takes it off, and Michio turns around, but still gets a good glimpse, enough to act as sauce for his meal. After she fixes up his sword, they feast. Then later that night, the innkeeper shows up with wipes and a bucket of water, enough for Michio and Roxanne to use. Michio goes first, and Roxanne gently scrubs his back for a short while. When it's her turn, he plays with her hair before helping her wash up. From there, Michio gives into his unholy desires and develops plot with Roxanne all night. The next morning, Roxanne surprises him by kissing him like he had requested of her the night before. Immediately, his lightsaber attains maximum value, but Michio tames his tiger by promising to have another go at it by nightfall. For the time being, they'll visit the labyrinth. As they prepare to leave the inn, Michio asks Roxanne how to add skills to her equipment, but she tells him that most equipment has those skills. Michio then emphasizes wanting to separately delegate skills to weapons, and Roxanne tells him he'll not only need special crystals for it, but also a blacksmith. Immediately, Michio asks her if he can learn the blacksmithing skill, but she tells him it's impossible and it's only meant for dwarves. Still curious about the matter, Michio talks about getting some special crystals and looking for a blacksmith to help him get the desired result, but then Roxanne discourages him by informing him about how most blacksmiths are frauds and how it's also very difficult to embed a skill into items. With that out of the way, he opens the window and silently adores her, then he hands her his leather armor, but when she tries it, Michio gets another signal to his sausage, so he hands her his jacket, then registers her under his party. Right after, they leave the inn, and on getting to the town square, Michio takes her to the alley. To her surprise, he opens a portal and drags her into it, and when she opens her eyes, she realizes they are in the labyrinth. Surprised, she asks him how he was able to pull it off since the skill was only something she thought could be used inside labyrinths. Michio simply shrugs her off and says skill issue. Then he tells her not to tattletale on him. Impressed, she praises him, and they move around looking for monsters. On their way, Roxanne gets a whiff of them and directs Michio, thanks to her wolfkin abilities. Impressed, he praises her, and she demands magic crystals, but this gets him confused as to why she needs them. Since he's a noob, Roxanne breaks it down to him by informing him that the crystals are used to store magic power after defeating monsters. Michio then realizes how he's been putting his life at risk and not collecting them, so he asks her how valuable the items are, and she rates them far higher than Gucci bags. Michio nearly breaks down in tears after discovering how much he has lost for being so clueless. Roxanne then cheers him up, and he asks her where he can get the crystals. Once she tells him he can buy empty ones at the guild, he informs her that they'll go there later. For the time being, they concentrate on checking the labyrinth out, and immediately they run into a monster. Michio decides to show off by summoning his sword and one-shotting the twig. As usual, he tells Roxanne not to tell anyone, and as they continue hunting for twigs, he notices Roxanne wagging her tail, so he concludes she's happy. By noon, they collect a lot of twigs, and as they praise each other for their strengths, Michio orders Roxanne to sit by his side whenever they get into the room. Then he promises not to leap on her. Immediately, the hot chick tells him she doesn't mind. He hugs her and asks for her permission to feel her ears. Rubbing them reminds him of the seafood in his hometown, and this makes her ask him if he plans to return. Seeing how worried she is, he promises her he can't return, and he won't discard her as useless. Later that evening, they go to the guild where Michio purchases 2 empty crystals for Roxanne. She thanks him and explains that after defeating 10 and 100 monsters, the crystals turn red and purple, respectively. Curious, Michio asks her if there's a limit, and Roxanne reveals the crystal will turn white after defeating 1,000,000 monsters, but most times they stop at green, which signifies 10,000. She also adds that most people sell it for the color blue, which is 1/10 that of white. The math nearly smokes Michio's head, so he goes with her to the labyrinth to vent some stress. Impressed by his immense strength, Roxanne tells him to go to the upper floors to fight stronger foes rather than farm the low tiers. From her, he learns that the labyrinth is a growing body that can only be defeated by demolishing the level bosses. Michio then wonders if there's a spell to simultaneously take down the dungeon bosses, and for that reason, he considers going the mage route. He checks his profile for a spell and tries casting it each time while fighting a monster, but he learns he doesn't have enough magic points to use it. After the 10th monster, Roxanne calls his attention and shows him that the magic crystal has turned red. He checks here and learns that only the person who strikes the death blow gains magic power. For that reason, he activates crystallization upgrades, and with them, he easily achieves a purple color without needing to defeat as many monsters as possible. Michio disables the skill and unlocks the party setting, and with that, he checks out her skill tree. He asks her if she has any healing spells, but she tells him it belongs to priest and monk jobs, and to attain such a role, one must defeat monsters with their bare hands. So he decides to test it out by having her land the death blow on their next victim. But then none of the healing rolls pop up on her tab, so he tries it out by switching to a lesser sword, but he fails at it and nearly gets mollywopped by the walking twig. Roxanne, on the other hand, steps up and goes full Muhammad Ali on the twig, and Michio is mesmerized by her agility. Not wanting to lose aura points, he buries his fist in the twig and sees that he still doesn't have the skill, but he sees Roxanne has already acquired it, so it dawns upon him that she was the one who took out the monster, and not him. Michio then instructs her to act as a meat shield on his behalf when fighting the next monster, and let him give the death blow. He uses the shabby sword to fight the next set of monsters, defeating them instantly, until he clashes with one who refuses to go with the plot. Seeing the chance present itself, Michio unequips his bonus weapon and pours all his points into his strength. Then, he charges right at the tree monster, which hits him squarely on the face, but he lands the powerful blow, sending the twig to the afterlife. Right after, he heals his face with the monk skill he just acquired, and promises to heal them both if they ever get injured. Later that evening, at the inn, they talk about what they learned so far, and clean up while at it. Michio's Johnny reminds him of his promise, so he ensures he buries it in Roxanne's La La Land. The following day, in the labyrinth, Roxanne explains that they are in the waiting room, right outside the first floor boss's room, and the prerequisite needed for the first floor boss to show up is for a party to walk right in. Michio sees how eager Roxanne is, so he asks her if she isn't scared, and she assures him, like All Might, that all is well, after all, she's here. With that, they walk right in, and she tells Michio that they might be lucky to get free equipment, which might have been what's left of a squandered party that lost to the boss. When they get inside, Michio sees how small the room is, and he gawks about, anticipating where the monster will appear from. Suddenly, the floor boss shows up, and it looks like the meager twigs on steroids. Roxanne starts by dashing at it like the ace, and she cuts down a vine, but the plant continues lunging attacks, which she casually evades without pausing. Michio fires an attack, and the plant tries to harm him, but Roxanne parries it and continues distracting it. With its flank open, Michio dashes at it and unleashes a cut so powerful that it cuts the plant in two. The creature leaves a leaf behind, and when Roxanne picks it up, she unlocks the herbalist skill. While looking through her status, Michio discovers a beast attack ability, so he asks her how it works, and she tells him it's a unique attack that beast folk use to unleash powerful blows. Unfortunately, Roxanne says she can't use it because it requires the right incantation, and it's something she can't accurately say. From there on, they move to the second floor, and Michio sees that it's not so different from the first. Once he learns that he can always fight the first floor boss, he instinctively goes back to the room, hoping to defeat it and earn the herbalist skill, but unfortunately for him, he's yeeted out of the dungeon. That's when the dunce remembers there's a waiting room, where party members wait for their turn while the current party fights the floor boss. Roxanne shows up a few seconds later, so to save face, Michio lies that he was simply experimenting with the door-crossing skill. Moments later, they fight the floor boss again, and this time, Michio says he's more relaxed than before. Suddenly, the huge twig prepares to release a magic attack, so Michio plunges his sword at the magic circle, ruining the spell, but then the twig whacks him in the face and then prepares to whoop him to kingdom come. Fortunately, his baddie steps in to hold it off, giving Michio a chance to land the death blow. He then briefs Roxanne about his sword and how it can absorb magic points and disrupt magic spells. Then he picks the leaf, earning the herbalist skill, and he instantly makes healing pellets. After that, Roxanne tells him how there are monsters that shoot out poison, and this gets Michio intrigued, so he later goes to the guild to demand the types of medicine they sell. After buying the pills, he notices how miserly the guild was for not offering him a discount, unlike the innkeeper and slave master. Still, on the topic, Michio realizes the reason he can easily pull up numbers and solve them quickly is thanks to the merchant skill he acquired along the line, and that's what helps him instinctively haggle prices. Since there's still time, he heads back to the second floor with Roxanne, and they see the tree monster has a companion with it. Irked out, Michio chooses to fight the tree monster while Roxanne holds off the creepy bug. As expected, he obliterates the twig and even helps Roxanne take down the bug. After picking up the spoils, Michio learns that the monsters increase by 1 based on the power of 2, so he does the math and concludes he'll face a pair of 6 monsters once he's in level 32. They continue their hunt and come across 2 caterpillars, so they try to assassinate them. Unfortunately, the green bug among the 2 uses magic to tie Michio up before lunging at him, but Michio stops it with his feet, then bonks it into non-existence with a single strike. With that, they conclude to take out the green caterpillars first each time they run into them. Later that evening, as they head home, Michio wonders how they plan to defeat the green caterpillars if they come across plenty. After all, they can't use multi-target spells. He concludes they'll head to explore other labyrinths for the time being, but then he notes he can't keep taking the easy way out. After taking some steps, Michio pins Roxanne to the wall and then tells her to look without turning ahead at a man hiding in the alley not too far from them. When she does as told, she sees the man staring at Alan's slave house, so Michio uses his skill to identify who the man is, and he learns the fella is a bandit. Sometime later, he visits Alan and informs him about it, but Alan pays him no heed until Roxanne reveals that the person is a bandit. Surprised, Alan wonders how they know the person's identity, but Michio roughly explains how he had learned to identify them when farming for funds for Roxanne. Alan calmly assesses the situation and concludes the bandit is after Michio, because the previous day, when he wanted to sell the bandit whom Michio had apprehended and turned into a slave to 2 guys, one of them was interrogating the dude. There, they deduce that the bandits are connected, and they might plan to raid the trade house. Despite knowing such a possibility exists, Alan remains calm and says he has some fighters to protect him. Since Michio has warned him enough, he prepares to leave, but Roxanne, who has grown a bit attached to the place due to a kind woman, worries, so Michio changes his mind and suggests Alan hire him as a bodyguard. Without giving it a second thought, Alan agrees, and they strike a deal. He then leads Michio and Roxanne through a secret door and tells them to use it when coming back. After they leave, Roxanne apologizes for being too forward, but Michio brushes her off by saying her problems are his. By midnight, she wakes him up with a passionate French kiss and reminds him it's time for them to act. Without wasting time, Michio prepares for battle, and he's shocked when Roxanne also tells him she's coming with him. Left with no choice, he takes her a long way but orders her to stay as far back as possible. On getting to the house, Roxanne and the other guards lie in wait for the bandits. She then informs them that the door is open, so Alan reveals he has some guards look after the slave, and the folks who can't fight gather on the second floor. Roxanne and Michio are tasked to look after the others, and as they assume their roles, Michio notices the spy among the bandits, heads into another room, hoping to escape, but then he follows the spy and goes through a list of spells he has, before finally deciding to use equivalent exchange. Michio sneaks into the room and assumes that he has more health and magic points than the spy, so he activates the skill, and he nearly drops dead. Hearing someone drop to the ground, Roxanne rushes into the room, and he realizes how the spell consumed a lot of his health points. Right in front of him, what was once the spy lay scattered in a pool of red juice, and Michio shudders as he realizes how careless he was and how extreme the spell is. Alan shows up shortly after, and after seeing the corpse on the floor, he assumes the bandit must have used a self-destruct orb. He pays Michio and thanks him for protecting them. On the way back, Michio walks like a depraved zombie, and Roxanne apologizes, believing it's because of her selfish request that he ended up that way. Michio casts door crossing to head straight into the dungeon and recover magic points. But as soon as he gets there, he nearly keels over from consuming the already depleted magic. Still, he fights some twigs till he recovers his magic power, and doing that also unlocks his mage skill. He browses through the skill tree and discovers he has access to the 4 elements, so he asks Roxanne how mages use them. Then he mentally casts Fireball. Surprised to see him use magic, Roxanne asks him about it since he told her he was an explorer, but as usual, he tells her to keep it a secret. He tries the spell on a twig, but it doesn't knock it out, so he bonks it with his sword. Since he has a curious mind, he tries different variants of the flame spell, and before he can try another element, he gets lethargic, signifying he has depleted his magic. He then checks around and notices there aren't any monsters, so he tells Roxanne they'll be going to the 2nd floor. When they get there, they see 2 tree monsters ahead, so Michio casts a firestorm spell that easily eradicates them. He fights a lot of monsters and learns he can use the other elements to make orbs, walls, and storms just like with fire. Since defeating the monsters recovers his health points, Michio makes a wall of water, then he collects some into his bag. Then he informs Roxanne that he plans to use magic as his main form of combat henceforth, and she hopes she'll bear with him. The lovely girl doesn't complain, and as they advance, taking down the monsters, Michio wishes he could increase his magic attack power, so Roxanne tells him about how mages use a staff. He considers getting one and recalls when the next market day falls, and Roxanne tells him it's better to visit Kuritar, a place that has lots of permanent shops. Once she informs him about how the marketplace serves a lot of explorers since there's a labyrinth nearby, Michio puts it on his bucket list. After walking for a while, they arrive at the boss's waiting room and attempt to face the 2nd floor's boss. When they get into the room, they discover it's a giant bug, and the insect tries to attack them, so Michio uses a firewall to offset its silk. Roxanne, on the other hand, charges right at it and slashes it, and when the caterpillar turns to retaliate, Michio finishes it off. With that, they move on to the 3rd floor, and Roxanne warns Michio that there's a kobold up ahead. A few seconds later, the monster shows up with a dagger, and Michio surprisingly finishes it off with a fireball. When he picks up the magic stone left, Roxanne tells him it's dirt cheap, so he leaves it and fights more. Suddenly, one drops a different item, and since his bag is full, he decides to keep it in his storage slot to help relieve Roxanne of her load. Shortly afterwards, they return to the guild to sell off their items, but Michio spots an elf acting as a chauffeur with her door-crossing ability to the Imperial City. After hearing Roxanne explain how convenient it is, Michio tells her he would have loved to try it out, but he has no business in the Imperial City. To his surprise, Roxanne reveals that Kuritar and the Imperial City are near each other, so he agrees to go there. Roxanne tells him to go without her since the trip is per person and quite expensive. Seeing that she isn't too attached to him, he relaxes and agrees to her wish. Then he turns off the party settings so he can use his warp ability to take them back there later. Immediately, the elf takes him to the capital, and he feasts his eyes for a bit before asking her to take him to Kuritar. Right after she takes him there, Michio uses door crossing to return to the inn, and he nearly collapses from mana exhaustion. Later that evening, he washes Roxanne's back before cracking her. He remembers they are in an inn, and people might hear happy noises, so he considers living alone with her, where he can get to hit anywhere all day. The next day, they arrive at Kuritar, and she leads him to the labyrinth, where he learns people pay a fee to enter. Michio worries a bit about it, but Roxanne reminds him that he simply has to pay the first time, because right after, he can use his ability to get in. They explore the town like a couple and arrive at a hardware store, while looking for weapons, but the store owner redirects them to another shop. As they walk around, Michio asks for housing options, and Roxanne lists a lot for him, and he agrees it's cheaper than staying in an inn. However, she tells him his case is different since he can easily move around, but then he retorts by saying he doesn't want people to know of his ability, and he'd also like to live a normal explorer. They go to the weapons store, and Michio's brain nearly fries as he struggles to pick a wand, but he eventually chooses a wooden one. Then, he heads to the woods before going back to the lady at the hardware store. After thanking her, they ask her for the town's description, and with her help, they learn the town is divided into 6 districts. Once she sees he's an explorer looking for a place to stay, the lady reveals she's the district manager, and she tells him how most explorers pick places particularly close to the labyrinth, but then Michio tells her he doesn't mind, so she checks Roxanne out and then takes them to the town's outskirts to show them a huge house. Although not in a perfect condition, it looks decent enough, so Roxanne and Michio play good cop, bad cop to get the lady to give them some seeds to plant. Not only that, as they check out the house, Michio goes to the 2nd floor, where he deactivates his party and uses door crossing between the places to check how convenient it is. He then returns to join the ladies and agrees to take the house. Moments later, he does the legal process, and the realization of having a personal place to stay sets in. When moving in, the lady shows them her cooking wares and acts too pushy with Michio, trying to get him to agree, but Roxanne speaks up and demands a discount on her items, and they eventually get her to agree to her terms. Up next, they leave the house, and as they think of miscellaneous items to go in, Roxanne suggests they check for furniture. They check it out, and Michio uses his door-crossing ability to return to the place, and Roxanne is surprised since the lady had boasted that the house was made with shielding cement, which means it should be very difficult to teleport, but Michio can move freely with his skill. He downplays himself, then urges Roxanne to follow him to the labyrinth, where he plans to use the wand he bought. He spots a monster, and with just 3 shots of fireball, he burns it to a crisp. Later that evening, they return to the inn for the last time, and Michio recalls how his adventures began there, so he feels nostalgic while he thinks about his progress. After the innkeeper brings the wipes and bucket of water, Michio cleans Roxanne up, before developing plot with her. Then he hugs her, noting she's warm, and they sleep like a couple. The next morning, as they give the room one last look, Roxanne calls it the place where Michio started taking care of her, and she notes he'll continue doing that. Feeling moved by her praise, Michio holds himself back from continuing from where they stopped last night. Instead, they head downstairs, and he hands the innkeeper the key. The man then teases Michio by saying he would have provided a free lantern if Michio had told him beforehand that it was his last night. Later that day, Michio and Roxanne move into their new place, and Michio makes enough water for Roxanne to clean up the place. While she's at it, he goes to visit the town's labyrinth, where he's taxed to pay a silver coin as his entrance fee. On getting to the 1st floor, Michio sees that Kuritar's labyrinth looks almost similar to Vale's, with the only difference being how crowded Kuritar's labyrinth is. He closely observes the floor and heads to where it is less crowded, then uses his door crossing to return to his place. He tells Roxanne that they can now go to the labyrinth without paying, and she welcomes him warmly. Seeing her act so proper tickles his pickle, and he wishes she were in a maid outfit, so he praises her for greeting him, then prepares to get down to business. Unfortunately, some folks show up with their furniture and ruin their private session. Once they move everything in, they take their leave, but then Michio feels insecure about people entering his home, because if they can teleport like him, they'll have easy access to his place. After a day of hard labor, he and Roxanne successfully moved all the furniture. He then crashes on the bed, but rather than log off, he grabs Roxanne, cops a feel, and then gets down to business. While at it, he realizes there's no light, and Roxanne apologizes for not purchasing candles, but Michio doesn't mind at all as he plans to feel her up till he's satisfied. The next morning, Michio wakes up to a kiss from Roxanne, and he wishes to spend all day with her, but he makes the hard decision for them to visit Kuritar's labyrinth since bans must be made. On getting to the labyrinth, Michio isn't comfortable with having many people around, but Roxanne tells him it's quite normal since the town's labyrinth is a very famous place. She informs him that the current undefeated floor is the 91st, and he realizes they have a long way to go. They walk to the waiting room and queue up to fight the 1st floor boss. When it's their turn, they walk in, only to find the kobold as the 1st floor boss. Roxanne immediately charges at it to attack it, but it blocks her attack and then tries to reach her. She easily reads its slow and little movement, and Michio walks up to it and defeats it in one strike. As they ascend to the 2nd floor, Roxanne advises him to use magic even though there are lots of people around, and the reason is that half of the monsters are weak fries. Disappointed, Michio opens a portal and teleports back home. Upon remembering the district manager's promise to hand her some seeds, Roxanne tells Michio to rest while she goes to meet her, but Michio insists he'll follow her right after they get something to eat. After their meal, they head to her shop, and she reveals she's been waiting for them. As she goes to get some seeds, Michio checks out her garden tools, but Roxanne calls it a waste of expenses because she believes using her hands is more efficient. The district manager shows up shortly after to explain the seeds to Roxanne, and as she yaps away, Michio makes up his mind to get the garden hoe, as he isn't ready to have Roxanne dirty herself. As soon as they arrive home, Michio asks Roxanne to sharpen the logs of wood to make a fence around their house while he tills the ground. They go at it all day, and by evening, they complete their work. Michio then takes off his sweaty clothes as he wishes to soak himself in a tub. Roxanne then brings up the idea, and the next time he visits the carpenter, he asks the man to make a large bath. Michio perfectly describes it to him with the intention that he gets to explore some of his fantasies, with Roxanne in the tub. When he gets back, they visit Vale's labyrinth and easily take down the kobolds on the 3rd floor. They pause there for the day and go back home to prepare a meal. As the days pass, they go about their daily activities and even visit Vale's inn after fighting the labyrinth's boss. One time, they fight a giant sheep, a floor boss in Kuratar's labyrinth, and the sheep stuns them when Michio charges at it. In response, Michio casts healing magic on Roxanne each time she's stunned to give her headroom to fight the monster. Eventually, they defeat it, and Michio, upon realizing after its death how its technique works, apologizes to Roxanne, saying it's her fault she got caught in the sheep's ability. He asks her to let him know if she's still damaged, because prioritizing the recovery of their stamina above everything else is the sanest way to go. After rizzing her up, he informs her that it's almost time, so they should head back home. Now at home, Roxanne wonders what they're waiting for, and within a few moments, the carpenter arrives with their huge bathtub. With his door-crossing ability, Michio moves it to the bathroom, then he explains to Roxanne that it's a bathtub. He starts by creating a water wall and heating it with fire magic. He does that a couple of times till the bath is nearly filled up. Then he has a soak before inviting Roxanne to join him. At first, she acts shy, but after a few questions, she reveals she'd gladly join him, so she hops in and enjoys the warmth. He then takes out soap, which he had made while tinkering with his alchemy skills. There, Michio helps her with a lot of first-time things, and Roxanne loves the course. Later that night, while she sleeps, Michio concludes he can't keep putting all the burden on her, so the solution is to add more frontline fighters to his party. Days later, on the 7th floor in Kuratar's labyrinth, Michio shoots down a rabbit, and he gets a pelt as a drop item. After gathering a few, Roxanne suggests they go to the Imperial City to sell them, because the guild won't pay much for the pelts. Confused, Michio asks her why it's of high value in the capital, so Roxanne explains that the rabbit pelt is used for clothing, and clothing stores in the capital will buy them for a high price. Michio wonders why, so Roxanne explains that coats made from rabbit pelts are exceptionally cold-weather clothes, and are very popular among noble women. Minutes later, Roxanne goes to the market and informs Michio, after showing the marketers their rabbit pelt samples, that they are ready to buy them if they have at least 100. Because of this, they head back to the labyrinth and Michio heartlessly burns his target to a cinder. Roxanne then thanks their stars for arriving early, so she tells him there's a treasure chest ahead, and she plunges her sword into the soil, before cutting it. Immediately, the door before them opens up, revealing a red rabbit as the special boss. Michio calls it cute but quickly takes back his word when the rabbit monster screams, while looking like a vampire dog in Blade. The rabbit leaps at Michio, but he misses his swing, and when it tries to attack Roxanne, she parries it off like it's nothing. Michio then casts magic on it, and then finishes it off in one blow. Roxanne gasses him, saying she could barely keep track of the rabbit, and he feels fly. The monster drops a rabbit's meat, and Michio notes they'll have to wash it thoroughly when they get home. Once Michio tells Roxanne they can have the meat for lunch, she suggests they make a schema roast out of it. Michio, who hasn't had it before, watches as Roxanne goes through the rigorous process of sizzling the meat in skewered herbs and pepper. He then gives it a trial and suggests they gather more meat while hunting for rabbit pelts, and this makes Roxanne glad that he likes rabbit meat. They get back to hunting, and after defeating a lot, they come across the waiting room and realize that up ahead is the 7th floor boss. When they get there, they see a party going on to fight the boss, and then a solo explorer waiting outside the door. Michio casually greets him, and he reveals that he wishes to make a party, but he can't help but bet on horse racing. The dude explains that he's been stuck on the 7th floor for 2 years, and thanks to that, he racks up experience points, believing that with it, he can finally take down the boss and acquire his first party members. The dude goes in, but shortly afterwards, Michio and Roxanne are permitted to come in. Immediately, they see it's the same red rabbit. Michio activates his skill and easily slashes down the rabbit. Once again, they acquire rabbit meat, but Michio suddenly spots someone else's equipment, and he notes it's for the loner whom they had met earlier. Michio sees a black crystal and learns that it was what the solo dude wanted to use as a trump card. Michio absorbs the fallen comrade's crystal and he worries about how little their lives are worth in front of danger. Roxanne senses his worry, but Michio tries to dampen it, so he smiles at her and informs her it's time for them to head home. By nightfall, Michio gets rough in the sheets, and he keeps thinking of how dangerous the quests they've been taking are. He ponders almost throughout the night about it, but then Roxanne hugs him to help him sleep. The next day, Roxanne wakes him up with the usuals, and they head to the labyrinth. This time around, Michio, who first worries about how he can end up like the fallen explorers, makes up his mind by vowing not to be weak anymore. He goes all out, one-shotting the monsters while vowing to get so strong that his existence becomes a threat like Zen and Toji. He then checks his profile and discovers they've dealt with about 300, so they head straight to a clothing store in the imperial capital and offload the rabbit pelts. The shop owner struggles with counting, so he asks for an excuse for himself while he confirms the amount they've brought to him. During that time, Michio checks through the clothes, and he sees a pink-colored dress, so he imagines Roxanne putting it on. Suddenly, an attendant shows up and tells him it's worn by noble women. He asks her for the price, and despite knowing how expensive it is, he buys 2 to thank Roxanne for saving him from his depression the previous night. The shop owner shows up shortly after counting and confirms the 300 pelts, then he pays Michio handsomely. When they get home, Roxanne promises to put on one of the nightgowns by nightfall, but Michio suggests they first have their bath. He goes to the tub and struggles a lot in filling it up, but then he runs out of magic points to heat it, so he tells Roxanne he's going to the labyrinth to recover his magic points. As usual, their regular opponents, although this time around, appear at the same time, so Michio dashes to finish them off, but then the Raging Bull gives him a tough time like Sekiro, but he eventually finishes the monsters off. Through sheer willpower, they return to their home and have a soak. On the upper floor in Kuratar's labyrinth, the duo struggles with taking down the fast bunnies, and Michio eventually strikes them down and feels exhausted, so he notes that he'll need more party members. Just then, Roxanne congratulates him by showing him a green crystal gotten from one of the rabbits, and she calls it a skill crystal. When Michio gets home, he checks the skill crystal out and the weapon, and worries about how to find a dwarf with the specific blacksmith job. Suddenly, Roxanne shows up with a meal, and she tells him it's her job to cook, and not his, but he pushes the conversation aside before telling her it's time to eat. After their meal, Michio hands Roxanne the skill crystal, and she's shocked that it has changed color from green to yellow, but Michio simply tells her not to tell anyone. He recounts how expensive yellow crystals go for, so he makes up his mind by telling her they'll be going to Vale next, because he wants to visit Alan and ask him to help him write a will. Roxanne feels sad and worried, but he tells her not to feel that way because it's only natural to be prepared to die if he's entering labyrinths. Michio's reason is for Roxanne to be set free rather than follow him to the grave if he croaks, but then she surprises him by asking him not to write because she vows to protect him. After all, if anything happens to him, she can't continue living in disgrace. Michio senses how serious she is, and he understands her plight, but then he explains how labyrinths aren't the only place one can pass on, and there's a possibility he can drop dead from an illness. Still, Roxanne vows to find an elixir like Hell's Paradise if that be his case. Left with no choice, he makes up his mind not to write the will any longer, but in return, he asks Roxanne why she's hell-bent on protecting him, and she calls him the best potential man she's ever come across. Not only that, but he's been so kind to her, and she wants to return the favor. While Michio senses her fighting spirit and compares her to a samurai, he tells her he wants to expand his party, and if he focuses on magic, then he'll need another frontline fighter. His mind races as he thinks about starting a mini harem, and to his surprise, she suggests he meet with Alan to discuss acquiring more fighters. Moments later, they show up at Alan's place, and Michio orders Roxanne to sit, or else Alan would think he had come to return her to him. Alan shows up shortly after, and they tell him they'd like to purchase another slave. He asks for a prerequisite, and Michio talks about wanting a dwarven blacksmith. Alan tells them it's a hard request, then he states that there's currently a female dwarf, but not a blacksmith. On hearing him, Roxanne requests that they see her, and within a few minutes, a dwarf named Sherry shows up. After keenly observing her, Michio walks up to her, and Sherry introduces herself before revealing she's a level 10 explorer. At first, he doesn't understand what she meant after telling him she failed to become a blacksmith, she explains that dwarves have the option to change their jobs to blacksmith when they become level 10 explorers. Michio learns that people with a high aptitude for dungeon exploration can also become blacksmiths. As he finds it hard to believe a dwarf could fail at it, he recounts how he acquired some skills and wonders how a dwarf's aptitude is measured. Michio then asks for clarity if there's a possibility that dwarves can change profession after surpassing the 10th level, but then Sherry doesn't know much about that. He looks at her and finds it bad for people to refuse to buy her because she failed at becoming a blacksmith, so he wonders if there's a required condition needed to unlock her potential. Before Alan sends her back, Sherry speaks up about her flaws and promises not to cause any trouble if he buys her. Left alone with Roxanne, Michio asks why Sherry was so assertive and ready to sell herself, but Roxanne talks about how useful Sherry is since she's been to a labyrinth or plans to join one. Also, she believes Sherry might not have the aptitude, but if she's hardworking enough, then her results will speak for her. Michio is glad that Roxanne didn't oppose Sherry, and he even learns from her that Sherry doesn't have much time to live, based on the rumor that the older dwarves get, the thinner their ears. Alan returns shortly after with the slave keeper, and immediately, Roxanne sees her. She hops to her feet, and Michio permits her to meet with her former caretaker. Alan then joins Michio and asks him what he thinks about Sherry. He convinces Michio to buy her and offers her for a price far lower than that of Roxanne. Since Michio has the merchant skill, he indirectly haggles with Alan till Alan beats down the price far enough for him to accept. Right after paying Alan, Roxanne shows up, so he informs her about it, and she smiles happily at his decision, but then he could have sworn he saw her face clouded briefly. Within a few moments, Alan brings Sherry over, and as she respectfully greets Michio, Roxanne introduces herself as Michio's first slave, which shocks Sherry because she assumes she was Michio's wife. Roxanne flatly denies it, and Michio feels hurt, but he holds it in like a man. Alan assigns Sherry to Michio, and they confirm their roles in their intelligence cards. With that said and done, they leave Alan's trade house, and Michio adds Sherry to the party. She gets confused, thinking they are an adventurer group because Roxanne tells her they'll be heading to Kuritar, but rather than explaining it to Sherry, Roxanne simply takes her through Michio's door crossing, and they instantly arrive at his place in Kuritar. Roxanne then ushers her in to have a seat. Then Sherry asks Michio if he can use multiple jobs, and he's impressed by her sharp intuition. He tells her it's something of the sort, and he only showcased his teleportation spell. Michio then gets curious, so he asks her if she knows people with multiple jobs, but she flatly tells him that it's only in myths that supreme people of such a caliber exist. Michio then switches topics by asking her the kind of weapon she specializes in. Sherry tells him she uses a spear, but when it comes to fighting on the front line, she prefers using a maul. Michio thinks deeply about it and then concludes that, based on how they could utilize other jobs by meeting requirements, there's the possibility she might awaken her blacksmith profession if she fights with a maul. Once he confirms Sherry hasn't defeated any monster with it, he tells her to try using it, and then Roxanne agrees to keep the monsters in check while Michio fires spells from the rear. Upon learning that Michio can also use spells, Sherry nearly passes on, as she confirms the legends are true, but Michio tells her to keep it a secret. Later that day, the party goes to the weapon shop to buy a maul for Sherry, and Michio learns that dwarves are very strong beings, contrary to their height. On getting to the shop, Michio browses through a lot of options, but Sherry picks a club that looks like a huge log, and she casually swings it like she's playing whack-a-mole. Seeing how compatible Sherry is with the weapon, Michio purchases it for her. When they get home, he hands Roxanne a new pair of shoes and instructs her to give Sherry his hand-me-downs. When it comes to armor, Michio believes it'll be hard to secure armor for her to put on. One time, Michio calls Roxanne over to help him with the usuals, and he informs Sherry that they are heading to the labyrinth and if she'd like to come. He tries baiting her by letting her complete her cooking, but Sherry tells him it's fine since she hasn't started cooking with fire. She quickly puts on her outfit, and he examines her club before asking if she knows what empty slots are. She calls it a skill slot and speaks fairly well on the topic, calling it a proposed theory, whereby equipment has slots that can be combined with skill crystals. Although Sherry loves to leave her options open, she concludes that nobody can see skill slots, unknown to her that Michio can see them as clear as day. Curious, Michio asks her what she knows about the adventurer job, and she tells him it's a legendary job that was held by the first emperor. From their discussion so far, Michio learns that the adventurer job is a very rare title. Some minutes later, they move to the 5th floor of the dungeon, and Michio notes he can one-shot the monsters quite easily. Seeing how anxious Sherry is, he decides to show off his skills by charging at the annoying sheep and cutting them like sliced bread. Coincidentally, Roxanne also follows suit, and at the end of it, Sherry praises Roxanne and asks her to teach her some moves, but Roxanne explains while demonstrating like a character from Power Rangers. Michio, on the other hand, recovers his magic points, so he opens up a portal and heads home. Once inside, Sherry learns that not only does Michio use the teleportation spell to travel to places outside the labyrinth, but he also does so without chanting. She panics and then asks him for his level, and he tells her he's on level 33. Roxanne nearly loses it since the last time he told her he was on the 20th. Sherry keeps digging closer to the truth as she finds it weird for Michio to be that strong, but he tells her to keep it a secret. By the time the food is ready, Shelley prepares to serve them theirs while she stands and watches, but they disagree and urge her to sit and eat with them. Michio serves himself first, then he nearly makes the fatal mistake of handing Sherry her ration before Roxanne, but a cynical grin from Roxy puts him back in his place. While eating, Sherry asks why Michio goes to the labyrinth to fight, especially right after preparing bath water, so he explains to them that because he runs out of magic points while casting the spell, he uses his special sword to replenish his magic at the labyrinth. Michio looks at the girls and asks them if humans have a unique job since wolfkin and dwarves have special ones. The girls act shyly and eventually open up about how humans have an insatiable desire, and their unique job is cracking cheeks. Upon hearing them, Michio makes up his mind not to keep his desires hidden, so after their meal, he takes them to their bath and tells them to join him to have a soak. In the bathroom, Michio's imagination runs wild as he anticipates them joining him. He gives in to his unholy desires and calls they so they can get cultured with him. After they're done, Michio falls asleep from all that energy drain, so Roxanne commends Sherry for keeping up with Michio's antics. She tells Sherry that Michio got excited because she was around, and she's glad he treated her like a proper woman. Together, the girls look forward to working with each other. The next morning, while Sherry has terrible bed hair, Michio checks his profile and sees he has gotten 2 new features added. One of them will make him perform like a pro, while the other will literally nuke him if he chooses to go the way of Nirvana. For that reason, he declares he'll get more slaves and make a harem for himself. As Michio continues his adventures, he scouts for goth mummies and different types of flowers to suit his garden, till he achieves every cultured individual's isekai fantasy. That's the end of today's video. Men of culture, let me know in the comments if you are buying and cracking Roxane. Give me plenty of likes, and I'll post unplotted. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see another recap like this, and keep your zippers up. Peace.